I wanted to build first. And now, um, what you mentioned, that striking that right balance between expansion and being conscious about the supply chain and doing it the right way
Mm.
is hopefully is sets a bar. And for me, I feel like the reason why I'm doing it is because I hope that it inspires people. And I hope that more people, I hope that, more brands or more, coffee roasters are able to have again, an inspiration or have an aha moment, say, okay, maybe this might be an approach that we can take, or even better, like, improve upon it and refine it and make it
Yeah.
even better.
We have an announcement to make. Starting this June, Mappa Forward is bringing a new perspective to the Japanese coffee industry with Mappa Forward Japan. Every 2 weeks, we're highlighting a selected series from the Daily Coffee Pro by Mappa Forward, translated and available in Japanese on our YouTube channel. Follow along on our new Instagram account, Mappa Forward Japan, where we'll share industry commentary, episode clips, and market updates all in Japanese. And if you're in the Japanese coffee industry, join our mailing list for updates and exclusive content, also in Japanese. All the details are at mappaforward.coffee/Japan, and we'd love you to share this information with your Japanese friends in the coffee industry. Check the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mappa Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 4 of a 5-part series with Yozo from Kurasu in Kyoto. And we're talking about starting, growing, and expanding a Japanese coffee brand. And there have been many brands that have expanded globally. A lot of them have followed a very similar track, whether are aggressive about it or whether it is, privately funded, whether it's private equity or investment fund, all of the things, right? You've been very clear that this is a franchise model, Yozo. You've expanded outside of Japan, but you spent time building it and solidifying it in Japan and then expanded. We want to talk in this episode about growing Kurasu beyond its original concept. And when people have spoken to me about your brand, let me say this, how it first happened. So when I went into Kurasu with my dear friend Alana, and we were sitting there and we were talking about the brand, and she said, so help me understand, like, how does this benchmark next to percent Arabica? And I was like, okay, interesting. Tell me why you equate these two things. Why do you, because in my mind, they weren't even in the same stratosphere, right? But for Alana, as a consumer, she connected those two things very clearly. And when we're talking about growing beyond an original concept, that's usually the step before expanding into other countries, expanding beyond what you are, right? And bringing in other influences. Tell me how you go about growing this thing that I think is probably going to turn into having a cult following around the world, but that I can say that, you can't say that. And you'll never admit that because you're Japanese and you're very humble. But when you look at a brand like Percent Arabica that people would say, oh, it has a cult following around the world from consumers, I see these two things as such a different things in the way that I see that they'll evolve. Percent Arabica being a commercial approach to coffee, it being very, I think it's capitalistic in a way that Kurasu is not, from what I see about the brand. And no disrespect to Percent Arabica at all. I'm not a customer of theirs. But tell me, how do you approach that?
Can I ask you, why do you think percent, why do you perceive percent Arabic as capitalism?
capitalist?
I think you mentioned capitalistic percent Arabica.
Yeah. So why do I see them as capitalistic? Okay,
Mm.
that's a fantastic question. Um, because I know that they're doing all the things to signal a consumer about why they should buy the money, spend
Mm.
their money, and
Mm.
why they should buy the product. And I don't see that same intention going into the actual product and into the
Mm.
employees.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So for me, when you are looking at building a brand
Mm. Mm.
and a solid, sustainable business, you are paying attention to all the touch points of your business. You
Mhm.
mentioned
Mhm.
that in a previous, in the last episode, I think,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you beautifully said, like, it's really hard to be
Mm.
focused on supply chain as well as being focused on the quality of the product and the customer
Oh.
experience and the finances of the business and the culture of the company and being a partner with your franchisees. All of these things are really, really hard to get
Yeah.
right.
Wow.
The capitalistic approach that I see from a brand like Percent Arabica, and I'm not like I'm a conscious capitalist, folks. I believe that
Mm.
capitalism is a really much better system than communism, but I still think that capitalism hasn't got it right yet. I think that there's a lot of predatory behavior that goes on. And when I look at Percent Arabica, they are all about the marketing.
Mm.
They're not all about the product. They're not all about the customer experience. And that for me is capitalism first.
Mm.
Product and supply chain and all of that important stuff takes a
Mm.
much bigger, much further back seat. I don't see that same experience
Really?
with
Yeah.
Kurasu.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what makes a change that? What I would say is that first of all, percent Arabica. I think there was a lot. I don't know the insides of percent Arabica. I don't know the
Hmm.
details, but it definitely, in a way, I would say one of the inspirations for us was
Hmm.
percent Arabica. The way that they were able to, and we knew that they were a franchise model, right?
Hmm.
But then they were able to expand to different locations around the world. They the first company actually set up in Hong Kong,
Okay.
right? So they're based in Hong Kong, but they were able to sort of brand their brand as a Kyoto, based brand,
Hmm.
and they was able to utilize different tools like you said in terms of marketing, Instagram, these different tools, and they're able to build a um, a very solid brand that
Hmm.
number of shops. You do see a lot of people going there. So there is something that people do feel a connection with somehow in some way. Yeah. So in that sense, I feel like there's a lot of things that we did learn or we can learn from Percent Arabica.
Hmm.
At the same time, like you said, and it's funny because oh, and again, in a lot of ways, we are similar, right? We are essential as well, right? And
Hmm.
we are expanding in different locations. But what the difference is that I feel like the intentions are different,
Right.
right?
In what
And
way?
and and that is something that um is so the devil's in the details, right? Like I feel like the Shodi-san, who is um the founder of Center Arabic, I've only chatted with him a few times, um
Hmm.
just in different places. I've never had a really deep conversation with him, but the way that they are expanding and the way when I look at their products, I do feel like like you mentioned, the focus is not really on the coffee side,
Yeah.
right? And the focus is not really trying to trying to you know educate or share the different aspects of and the depth that coffee has, from when we talk about the supply chain, from when we talk about all
Yeah.
the different things that coffee touches, right? And it's more about the final product. It's more about, I think for percent Arabica in particular, it's the latte art
Hmm.
and sort of the beauty of that, and their branding, and the designs and the shops.
Mm.
Right. So um, I would love to know, when we talked about what's your exit plan, right? I would love to know, that's like what is his intention, right? Like where is he, is he thinking of just selling everything? Does he have a purpose of, and that's not
Mm.
really clear. And it's very, I feel that in that sense, it is very closed. Like
Mm.
we do not know that from just looking at maybe their website or whatever, or like he's never really come out of
Maybe he should
you
come
know
on the podcast.
yeah, maybe he should. I would love, no, I would genuinely love to hear his perspective of,
Maybe you
and it
could
might
make an introduction.
it might be something very fascinating. But I feel like we do try, for myself personally, my
Hmm.
intentions, and you know where how we want to, or why we do it, and how we do it. Try to be as transparent as possible. Transparency is another word, right? That
Another
that gets that
buzzword.
gets thrown out a lot, but I really
Yeah.
do feel that is very important, um, to for people to understand who we are and where we stand. Um, so yeah, I feel like I feel like with Kurasu, I feel like I do want to touch on the different aspects that, and the fascination that coffee I have for coffee,
Mm.
from the supply chain perspective, from the home brewing, or some parts of it is the equipment side. A lot of parts of the communities is the people behind it, is the
Mm.
roasting. Is there so many different, our people, our partners, like that we work with, like Felipe, right? So there's so many
Mm.
different aspects of it. Um, and we try our best to take have our customers, you know, be on that same journey as we are going through.
And is that an important part of your brand? Like, is when you say customers, are you talking about the consumer or the
Yeah,
person who's
yeah,
buying the franchise?
yeah.
And is that an important part of that process?
I think that is a very, very important part of it, for sure.
Nice.
Because, and then, to be fair, like no matter how much effort that you put into, it's those intentions, um, from the consumer side. It's hard for the consumer to understand those intentions. It's more about,
Mm.
just going to the shop and taking photo, Instagram, or whatever it is. And that's fine, feel. But I feel it's on us. It's like a duty, um, on us to make that effort to, yeah, again, to have our customers, you know, um, even just a little, through the different experiences, through the different shop visits, or through our website, or through the content that we push out, to um, for for our customers, and for the people that see our brand, and touch and have some connection with specialty coffee, where it is something that is so complex and multifaceted.
You know, sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
You gave me a thought that I've never had before, which I love. Um, what do you think the relationship is between visibility and growth?
Mm.
It sounds to me that you're intentional and different. amongst your peers in the sense that visibility into what you do is very important. Visibility for all the people in your ecosystem. And that's really clear through this conversation. What connection do you think that visibility has with growth? Do you think it feeds it? Is it intentional for you?
Yeah, at least for me, and that's a really cool question, how that ties into growth. And I feel like when you take a brand like Arabica, for example, or when you take like any big corporation that has thousands of stores, and when you look at the F&B space, are they transparent with what they're doing? No.
Yeah.
But they're able. It has to mean something that they're able to like have thousands of shops globally, right? So I think I go back to, I'm trying to, and it's tough because it's so subjective, right? And I'm always very conscious to, and I mentioned that I love when I learn something that, or something that is that I learned something that
is new
or I have been wrong about.
Yeah.
I'm always questioning myself because I am, for better or for worse, the anchor of Kurasu, right? Because I am the 100% owner, and at least for now, and that definitely has to change, I feel, because because you do see a lot of brands where the founder has that intention, whereas when it becomes, when it's handed over, right, those intentions change, and
100%,
right. So I'm thinking down the road, like, how do I pass on sort of my what I feel in myself is right to,
and you're thinking about that from now, right?
Yeah. To continue on that path. And then it very, very timely. We just welcomed our first daughter. Is
Congratulations.
4 months and a few weeks now.
Oh, wow.
So I've been thinking more and more about that after that. But
legacy.
Yeah. But it is such, there's a lot of bad precedent, right? I think with brands all over the world where it has not worked out. And I do want to try to, I feel like I can hopefully, steer it in the right direction as long as I'm able to, but it has to, again, be sustainable. It has to continue on, I feel. So that is something that I definitely, do think about. But sorry, I went off on a tangent a little bit. What was that verse? No,
that's fine. Well, this whole conversation has been beautiful tangents, one after the other. So we were talking about visibility, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about, and that's how we got the tying it back in, because it's all kind of relevant here. We start at % Arabica, and we talk about how we look at it as a capitalistic kind of endeavor, and it probably didn't start like that. And when I want to reiterate, when I say it's a capitalistic endeavor, I'm not shit talking it at all, right? Business is business, and we do business in different ways for different reasons. And the beautiful thing, I explain it to clients this way: 2 people standing in front of a canvas of art, painting the same fruit bowl, have to make a million different decisions to arrive at what their artwork is going to look like. Both painters are going to come up with very different artworks. Neither is right and neither is wrong. That's that subjectivity that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so we make all of these decisions in business as though we're artists. I believe that entrepreneurs are creative artists
Yeah.
using business as their creative outlet.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
millions of decisions that you're making every day are all contributing to what your artwork is going to look like.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some artworks are going to sell for ridiculous amounts of money and you have no idea why. And the one that you thought would have sold for a lot of money goes out of business and doesn't get sold at all.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
the exact same thing that we're dealing with
Yeah.
here. So when I say that a business is capitalistic, good for you, bro, right? Like go do what
Mhm.
you're going to do. What I look at is a company like Percent Arabica, and I think
Mhm.
with the amount of coffee that they and the way that
Yeah.
they engage with the
Yeah.
supply chain, it's a missed opportunity
Yeah.
to inform an industry and to inform a consuming
Yeah.
population all over the world about what could change,
Mhm.
what we need to do differently in coffee, how impactful regenerative agriculture could be. And I
Yeah.
say that the same way I say that about Nestle. In the same way that I say that about a lot of the
Mhm.
big,
Yeah.
massive companies, right? It's a consequence of getting that big.
Yeah.
Just like you're saying that as this grows, you may have to change the way that you structure the business or the way that you move things forward in order to create the legacy that you need to create. But all of those things that get us there are a million little decisions.
Mhm.
Some of them are forced upon us, some of
Mm.
them are external from us, but they all go into creating this canvas that after you finished it, you look back and people just see a canvas
Mhm.
and you see that special little point here, the pink that you used,
Mhm.
that you had to mix with a little bit of white in the red paint that got that specific color and why you chose that specific color on that particular part of that painting, whereas the other person chose blue.
Yeah.
And this is all a part of growth that business owners, I think, don't quite understand as they go into taking something
Mhm.
from a successful coffee shop to going on the journey of creating something that's well known within their city
Mhm.
to something that expands globally.
Yeah.
What how do you approach when you look at that kind of growth? How do
Mhm.
you approach the mindset as an entrepreneur? How do you approach that specific? Like I use the canvas and artist thing as the way of looking at that. How do you approach thinking about growth?
Yeah. Again, that's such a great question. I think um, I would definitely say that every step of the way is a learning process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons why, again, like we have so far been, been successful, um, and the definition of success is,
Objective as
is
well.
subjective, ambiguous, but I think how we've been able to do it is because I always, again, I think it ties back into my my passion for wanting
Mm.
to grow and never mm, never making it so that it has to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's fixed. And, this is our branding. This is our, this is how it should be. This is how it must be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we talk about percent Arabica, that is, you know, the approach that we've made is a bit of a contrast as well, because I do feel, at least from the outside perspective, percent Arabica is more about really protecting the brand, protecting its visual
Yeah.
identity, protecting sort of how they are perceived, how their baristas work.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I would say not much flexibility. The
Mm-hmm.
menu very fixed. Everything is quite fixed, and again, from an entrepreneur perspective, it makes sense. That's sort of how they're able to
Right.
maintain their brand identity and be able to, open all these shops all of the globe. Um, and I feel like that's also the reason why a lot of the big private equity or very large
Hmm.
investors are interested in the brand because it's it's already set, right? So it's not like they have to put in the
Yeah.
effort to really try to build something.
Out of the box.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
aggressive. Their market, they're quite aggressive when they go into a market
yeah, yeah,
of dominating in that market.
yeah. Exactly. For us, I feel like when you talk with David and Kyle, or when you talk with our partners, I think Indonesia is a really great example. We're growing pretty fast in Indonesia right now. But when
Hmm.
you talk with our partners, it's tough, and they put in so much effort, and it's something that I feel like we, um, but it's expected, right? I think they come in with that expectation that we want to put in the effort, we want to sort of try to build
Hmm.
something together, and for David and Val, they've worked so
Oh,
hard,
you can
so
see it.
so long
Oh,
hours.
yeah.
And they're sort of they're in it as well. They're not. It's not like, okay, you know, look at
Mm.
the baristas. You do. We're not the coffee people. You do your own. They're really they're on the floor. They're
Involved.
they're involved, and they want to be involved. They want to be part of Kurasu. And I think
Hmm.
I would definitely not see that at Percent Arabica. I feel I would definitely not see
And
the investors being on the
no,
floor
bro.
and and talking to the guests, and I think they would not allow that, because that's not. I
Yeah.
think that would not be part of their their brand identity, right? So no, I think that's such an important part of our brand. And again, going back to the comment that we left off in my comment that we left off in the last episode, where I feel like I genuinely do feel that, if we are able to like continue, and again, it's going to be because of the way that we approach it, we are setting a bar, I feel, so much higher than the brand like Percent Arabica, right?
I would
Because
agree.
it is, it is not copy and paste, right? We're trying, at least we're trying to make, an effort um, to add. I always say that I want to try to add value. And
Mm.
if I don't feel like we're adding the value to the community that we open in, then I
Hmm.
feel like it's not really worth it. If we're just there to like, just, if we're just there to be flashy, or you're just there to, you know, um, have people come in because it's just um, a buzz.
Yeah.
Then I feel like it's we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't take that approach, right? So um, again, if we are able to sustainably pull this off in different countries, I do. It might. I have not, in my eyes, at least, I have not really seen another coffee brand be able to pull it off, to have that right balance. And
And if you can pull this off,
yeah,
sorry, if you can
yeah,
pull this off,
hmm,
what it ends up demonstrating to the market,
yeah,
and you won't be able to say, you can't say this, I can say this.
hmm,
If you can pull this off, what it demonstrates to a market is that you can have a franchise model
yeah, yeah,
that doesn't dissociate itself from its commitment to its franchisees
hmm,
and
hmm,
its commitment to the supply chain. Because
yeah,
usually what you see is one of those two things get
yeah,
sacrificed,
yeah, yeah.
which is where you're talking
So
about adding value, right?
yeah, yeah. So no, I really appreciate you mentioning that, and I do feel that for myself as well, and that actually ties into the setting a standard, a new
Yes.
standard for me, because
Yeah.
initially, and it still is for me, I wanted to build a coffee company that um, attracts different talents, and has
Mm.
even having a company that the name itself is not really, you know, is not really something that is seen here in Japan, right? So that's what
Hmm.
I wanted to build first. And now, um, what you mentioned, that striking that right balance between expansion and being conscious about the supply chain and doing it the right way
Mm.
is hopefully is sets a bar. And for me, I feel like the reason why I'm doing it is because I hope that it inspires people. And I hope that more people, I hope that, more brands or more, coffee roasters are able to have a, again, an inspiration or have an aha moment, say, okay, maybe this might be an approach that we can take, or even better, like, improve upon it and refine it and make it
Yeah.
even better. I'm always thinking how, the industry as a whole, we can sort of improve and evolve, right? So again, it's for me, it's never really, at least for myself, it's never really about us. We're just trying to hopefully set a bar. We're trying to do it
Hmm.
right. We're trying to do it the right way. And if other people, do it in a similar fashion, or do it in a positive fashion, in a different way, then I feel that's a positive for the industry. And unfortunately for me, starting starting in industry 2012, and we've talked about, we talked about, some of because I aspire to, Intelligentsia or Stumptown or, Blue Bottle, or those were, when I went to San Francisco, went to Blue Bottle for the first time. That was like a
Hmm.
wow experience for me. I was like, this
Right.
is this is something so cool,
Yeah.
right? And then, for and you mentioned that there's it's not that it's right or wrong. It's just things have shifted,
Hmm.
right? So I feel like, the industry, um I feel like somehow, unfortunately, the industry has, felt a bit stuck, or
Yeah, there is a
lost
stagnation.
lost the sort of a little bit of aspiration
Yeah.
of sort of the outcomes of what started in the 90s and what started as an inspiration. And um because, yeah, um again, I go back to the James Hoffman video, because I just watched it. And
Uh
you're
huh.
talking about none of these. You're talking about, so the premise of the video is, sorry, I'm going off in a tangent again. The premise of the video, why Starbucks, why the V60, why people started using V60 because of Starbucks, is because the filter coffee, like, with specialty coffee movement happening, people
Hmm.
started getting the filter coffee, and then
Hmm.
there was no really good way of serving filter coffee at the time. And here comes a machine, Clover.
The Clover machine.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Clover machine that came in, and
Most people
everyone,
have no idea what that is.
yeah,
And there's
yeah,
an interesting reason
yeah,
for that. I'm sure you're going to
yeah.
reveal it now. Go
And
ahead.
then, and then a lot of like Intelligentsia, sometimes they started using Clover. And then, yeah, Starbucks bought it out, right?
Bought the rights to it
And
so nobody
bought,
could have them.
yeah, exactly. Um, and no, I think they were still able to use it. I think, but anyway, in the story, Stumptown, the founder of Stumptown, got so angry about that, and they had like a dozen Clovers in all their Stumptowns, but they removed it on the day that Starbucks announced
Right.
that they were getting the Clover. But that sort of shows that sense of really counterculture, um, and then there's also talks about the wide sort of demonstrations that are happening against Starbucks because the exploitation that were happening in some of their farms as well. So there was like mass riots happening in Seattle and all those things. So those are happening, right? And then now it seems like everything's sort of homogeneous in a way. Like everyone's part of Nestle, basically, right?
Yeah.
But
The
yeah, so
irony of it, though,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
The irony
yeah.
of a company like Sumtown coming from that kind of moment to now being owned by a major corporate.
Sure. Exactly. So yeah, that's sort of where we are, and
Yeah.
I feel like there are like I would say, when I did go to Copenhagen for World of Coffee, I was impressed. I haven't been impressed with just the coffee scene in general, for a while, but I was impressed with Copenhagen. I was
Yeah.
really happy to see coffee collected, you know, and still on its mission, right? Still doing
Nice.
what it's set out to do, and I think they've sort of pivoted. It seemed that they pivoted, they're opening more shops now
Hmm.
in the city, which is cool, but still having the relationships with the same producers, same coffee and everything, but more available for more people in the city. So there's always going to be bright spots in the industry, but I feel like it helps to have more, right? And hopefully we can
And
be we can be at least one of those. Yeah.
I don't think you're going to have anything to worry about. But that's even hearing that is dangerous for an entrepreneur. I always hesitate to say that to people who are creative business people like you, is because like that kind of assurance is almost like kryptonite, right? Because entrepreneurs, we're always chasing being better, growing. We're chasing like being on that cutting edge of creating what everybody else is going to want to be like. And especially with a brand like Kurasu, that's definitely what's going on.
Sure.
So speaking of which, folks, join us for the final episode where we're talking about expanding Kurasu globally. If you have a coffee brand and you're thinking that you would like to expand globally, this is the episode that you do not want to miss. So join us for that. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.